The young corporal didn't even look up from his screen when the trembling hand slid the military ID across the checkpoint counter. He glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds before letting out a sharp laugh that cut through the morning air like a knife. "Sir, this ID expired before I was even born," he said, his voice dripping with condescension as his partner joined in the mockery. The old man standing before them said nothing, his weathered face carved with lines that told stories these boys couldn't begin to understand. But what happened in the next 60 seconds would change everything they thought they knew about respect, sacrifice, and the ghosts that still walk among us. It was a cold Tuesday morning at Fort Bragg when Samuel Cross arrived at the main gate, his 78-year-old frame slightly hunched, but his eyes still sharp as winter steel. He'd driven 4 hours from his small cabin in the mountains, clutching an invitation he'd received 3 weeks prior, a formal request for him to attend a classified briefing. The letter bore seals he recognized from a lifetime ago, from a world these young guards standing before him had only seen in history books. Samuel had served in Vietnam, but not in any unit these soldiers would find in their databases. His war had been fought in shadows, in jungles so deep that sunlight was a memory, in operations so secret that even decades later, most files remained sealed in vaults beneath Washington. He'd lost friends whose names were never carved into any memorial wall, men who'd bled out in his arms whispering final words meant for families they'd never see again. The corporal, whose name tag read Martinez, picked up the ID card between 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "Dude, look at this," he said to his partner, a smirking private named Chen. "This thing is from 1971. My dad wasn't even born yet." They both laughed, that careless laughter of youth that hasn't yet learned the weight of consequence. Samuel felt a familiar tightness in his chest, not from anger, but from something deeper, a profound sadness at how quickly the sacrifices of one generation become invisible to the next. He'd been prepared for this in a way. The modern military moved fast, celebrated the new, and sometimes forgot that heroes don't always come with fresh uniforms and digital records. "I have an appointment," Samuel said quietly, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "If you'll just make the call on your list, you'll see—" "An appointment?" Martinez interrupted, his grin widening. "Grandpa, I think you took a wrong turn. The VA hospital is about 20 miles that way." Chen doubled over, laughing, slapping the counter. Other soldiers waiting in line began to notice the commotion, some pulling out phones, ready to capture what they assumed would be an amusing moment for social media. Samuel felt the familiar weight of invisibility settling over him, that same feeling he'd carried since coming home all those years ago. The sense that what he'd done, what he'd survived, somehow didn't matter anymore. But he'd driven 4 hours. He'd received official orders, so he stood his ground, even as his heart hammered against ribs that still ached from injuries sustained in a war these boys probably barely studied in school. That's when Martinez made his fatal mistake. Growing impatient, he waved dismissively at Samuel. "Listen, old-timer, I'm gonna need you to clear out before I call someone to escort you off base. Your ID is invalid, and frankly, showing up here with expired credentials could be considered—" He never finished that sentence, because at that exact moment, the computer system behind him erupted in a cascade of alerts that none of them had ever seen before. A crimson notification flashed across every screen at the checkpoint, accompanied by a piercing alarm that made everyone freeze. The words that appeared in bold capital letters sent ice through Martinez's veins. "Top secret clearance verification in progress. Special access program. Notify base commander immediately." Chen's face went from amused to pale in seconds. Martinez stared at the screen like it had just spoken a language from another dimension. Within 90 seconds, 3 Humvees arrived at the gate, and a Colonel Samuel didn't recognize jumped out. followed by a general whose uniform carried enough medals to tell a lifetime of stories. But it was the look on the general's face that said everything, a mixture of profound respect and something close to awe. The general walked straight past the stunned guards, came to attention before Samuel, and executed a salute so crisp it could have cut glass. "Colonel Cross," the general said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent checkpoint. "Sir, we've been expecting you. Please forgive this misunderstanding." The emphasis on that last word made Martinez want to disappear into the pavement. What those young guards didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that Samuel Cross wasn't just any veteran. His name appeared in exactly 7 classified documents, each buried so deep in Pentagon archives that only 15 people in the entire Department of Defense had clearance to access them. He'd led a team of 12 men on a mission in 1968 that prevented a catastrophe so severe its details remain sealed to this day. He'd been captured, tortured for 43 days, and escaped through enemy territory while carrying a wounded teammate on his back for 18 miles. He'd been awarded the Medal of Honor in a ceremony attended only by the president and 2 generals, and even the citation itself had been classified. For 50 years, Samuel had lived quietly, never speaking about what he'd done, never asking for recognition, content to fade into the background of a country that had moved on without him. As the general personally escorted Samuel past the checkpoint, the old veteran paused and turned back to face Martinez and Chen. Both young men stood at rigid attention, their faces burning with shame. Samuel looked at them for a long moment, and then he did something unexpected. He smiled, a gentle, sad smile that carried more forgiveness than they deserved. "It's okay, sons," he said softly. "You didn't know. But maybe now you'll remember that every old man you meet might be carrying stories heavier than mountains. Treat them accordingly." His words hung in the air like a benediction, a lesson wrapped in grace. Later that afternoon, after his briefing, Samuel drove back toward his mountain cabin as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. He thought about those young guards, about their laughter that had stung more than any wound he'd taken in combat. But he also thought about what the general had told him, that his mission, after all these years, was finally being declassified, that his team would posthumously receive recognition, that their names would no longer live only in his memory. As he turned onto the winding road that led home, Samuel whispered the names of his fallen brothers one more time, letting them echo through the cab of his old truck. And for the first time in 50 years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, they could finally rest. Because the world was about to remember what they had done, what they had sacrificed, and why some IDs, no matter how old, still carry the weight of eternity.